got the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired eyes on the case, breaking down the game and the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues, takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder fight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, sleuth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, get deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And Charles started out saying, cool song, awesome intro. I appreciate that. Your wife actually is the one who decided to put a little bit of information about me into an AI song generator, and it spit the song out. And then a buddy who appears on the show pretty frequently, the Shy Kid, is the one who actually put together the video clips and whatnot to match along with it. So appreciate the compliment nonetheless, though. Happy Wednesday. Unfortunately, even though there's so much sad news going on in the world today with school shootings, with people being hurt, unfortunately, with the unfortunate passing of Charlie Kirk as well, my thoughts and prayers definitely go out to him. And I want to say this real quick. This is not a reflection of MBR or anything like that. Whether you like the guy or not, he's still a human being. He's a 31-year-old dad. He was a 31-year-old husband who unfortunately leaves behind 2 kids. Whether you agreed with him or not politically is entirely up to you. I'm not going to try to force you to like him or anything to that extent, but just recognize he was still a human being. He was still a person. And unfortunately, 2 kids now have to try to be explained to why their dad isn't going to come home tonight. So just please remember that as you move forward, as you think about things, that is the unfortunate reality that those kids have to live in, and that we as a society and as human beings have to live in currently. But nonetheless, though, do want to talk about sports, because there's a lot of interesting things that happened in sports recently over the past weekend, especially in the NFL, as well as college football. We had yet more upsets in college football. I was happy to say that I went 9-2 in my predictions this past weekend for college football, at least. I don't know what I did in the NFL. Like I said, I didn't really keep track of it. The NFL is kind of hard to really pick, at least early on in the season, because some teams do actually better than what a lot of people expect. So we'll get into the NFL first. I know I typically do college, but we'll get in the NFL first. I'm not going to cover every game. I am going to cover a few, though, that I thought was probably the most interesting. The first being the Bengals at the Browns. The Bengals ended up winning 17-16. The Bengals defense is actually what ultimately ended up saving them. The other thing that ultimately ended up saving the Bengals is the fact that Cleveland was Cleveland and missed 2 field goals that would have potentially put them up 22-17. And Cincinnati in the second half just wasn't really able to move the ball. I mean, Cleveland was able to do pretty much everything better as far as running, passing. You know, Joe Flacco, even at 40 years old, 31 of 45, 290 yards and a touchdown. And for them to only lose by a point at home shows kind of that Cincinnati was honestly going to hurt themselves more than anything, but Cleveland managed to find a way to, browns it up more than anything, which was kind of a surprise. I do want to see what Cincinnati looks like as the season progresses. Obviously, it's just the first game. There's still a lot of rust. There's still a lot of, things to be tweaked and figured out and fixed throughout the meantime. So it's just the first game of the season. It's not, you don't totally have to freak out yet. But it will be interesting to see how they go. The Browns, I'm not super surprised. This is kind of what I expected out of them. There's not a whole lot of, I would say, upside or brightness to the Browns at the current moment. Just looking at their team offensively, there's not a lot to get excited about. Running back, quarterback wise, do they have the guy in Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders? That's yet to be seen. We haven't seen Dylan play in an actual regular season game, nor have we seen Shedeur yet. So that'll be yet to be seen. We'll have to look in about a month to kind of see where the Browns are at. Is there a shot that they could potentially go to the playoffs? We'll have to wait and find out. If not, maybe they put both rookies in just to see what happens and just to see if they can get any type of magic come about it. Here in Indy, huge surprise with the Colts blowing out the Dolphins 33-8. It was actually 23-0 for the longest time. Then the Dolphins were finally able to actually score 8 points. Then the Colts also scored 10 in the fourth quarter. Daniel Jones looked significantly better than what I thought he was going to look like. He went 22 of 29, 272 yards and a touchdown. He looked fantastic. The Colts scored on every single drive that they had. And even snapped an 11-game opening day winless streak that they had. The last time the Colts won a week 1 victory was in 2013. Andrew Luck's second year in the league was the last time that they won. They went 0-11-1 ever since, which again is surprising considering it's Daniel Jones. I do remember when I was picking the games, I had picked the Dolphins originally to win it just because I didn't have that much faith in Daniel Jones. I'm still a little skeptical of him just because of his past, just because of, what he had. Now, he does have a better offensive line in Indy. He's got a little bit better weapons. Tyler Warren obviously looks fantastic out of Penn State. I know, MJ, if you're watching this, you'll be super excited because I know Tyler Warren was one of your great players there at the Penn State for the Nittany Lions, and he looked absolutely as good as advertised, if not better. And it looked a little bit more balanced. Jonathan Taylor had 71 rushing yards. So it looks like the Colts maybe found the bridge guy that might get them into the playoffs. I don't know if they'll be able to make a run, but I think he'll at least be able to get them close enough to that point if things continue to trend the way that they do. But just really surprised that they were able to beat the Dolphins more than anything. The other one that was kind of a surprise, Geno Smith and the Las Vegas Raiders upsetting the Patriots at home 20-13. Geno Smith throws for 362 yards and a touchdown in a win over the Pats. I'll be honest, I was not expecting that. The Raiders were another team that I didn't know what to expect out of them. It's a team with Ashton Genty. He's a young running back, very dynamic out of Boise State. Terry from Tracer Rounds podcast. Terry, I appreciate you tuning in, ma'am. If you guys want a really good podcast that, she highlights a lot of other veterans, law enforcement, EMS, all of that, Terry of Tracer Rounds podcast does a really good job of doing that. So definitely check her show out whenever you get the opportunity to. I'm sorry about your Dolphins, by the way. Anybody who doesn't know, Terry is a Dolphins fan. I apologize that the Colts beat up on your Fins a little bit. I'll be honest. I did not expect that. I definitely picked your Dolphins to win, and I was very surprised that they ultimately did not. But back to the Raiders and Patriots, I just didn't know what to expect from them. I didn't know what to expect from the Raiders offensively. It does show a lot with Pete Carroll that he was honestly kind of able to get the upset win. I know for a lot of people, they potentially had the Patriots winning 10-11 games. And I think that's still possible, but this was one of those games that they were supposed to potentially win. So who knows? Maybe they get an upset win later on down the line that kind of, balances everything out. We'll have to wait and see. The other big game that was probably one of the most entertaining for the day, Sunday, you had Steelers at the Jets. Aaron Rodgers debuts against his old team, and Justin Fields also debuts against his old team. both absolutely, balled out in this game. Aaron Rodgers goes 22 of 30 for 244 yards and 4 touchdowns in his Steelers debut against the Jets. That probably is what is the most surprising about that, is the fact that, Aaron Rodgers comes in and does so well right off the bat. And again, it's one of those, for anybody who's watched the show for a long time, I am not a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I'm not a fan of Aaron Rodgers by any stretch of the imagination. And I had a complete and total lack of faith in Aaron Rodgers as he was getting ready to do his debut. And of course, he has to go out and he has to prove me wrong. He goes 22 of 30, 244 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was sacked 4 times. So it's a little bit of a, I would say, kind of worry on that Steelers O-line. They are facing a good Jets defense, though. Justin Fields just as equally solid. I mean, 16 of 22, 218 yards, touchdown, was only sacked once, and had 48 rushing yards. The Jets running game looked really good as well. Breece Hall, 19 carries, 170 yards, no touchdowns. And then Justin Fields also ran for 2 touchdowns on top of the one that he threw. So, I mean, this all looks fantastic. It just kind of the end with the Jets being the Jets. Jalen Ramsey delivers a just absolute knockout Steelers type of hit to Garrett Wilson to keep the Jets from even being able to, really compete and kind of drive all the way down there. He's able to get it on 4th down ultimately in the game. That was probably one of the more entertaining and surprising games more than anything that I wasn't expecting to have happen at all. Another game, and obviously we have the Lions and Packers. That one is a little bit surprising. I do wonder how much Detroit is going to differ now that Ben Johnson is gone, as well as, Glenn for the defensive coordinator, who's now the head coach of the Jets. I do wonder, what do the Lions now look like without those 2 coordinators there? There's a lot of people, they were worried in the preseason. My argument was that it's preseason. It's not really that deep. The Packers just seem to come out with a little bit more fire. I don't know if that's just, Micah Parsons at least initially being there, giving them a little bit of a spark. They have a star defensive player. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Skip Bayless. He did point this out, and I will say, as somebody who used to be a pretty big Cowboys fan, I don't disagree with what he said. He did bring up the point. Micah always starts out very hot at the beginning of the year, and then he cools down as the season goes on and progresses. Now, Green Bay has a pretty talented defense overall. They typically kind of do like a defense by committee type of deal. Rashawn Gary's solid. The secondary I do have a little bit of questions about, but I mean, I've had questions about them even when they did have Jair Alexander before they released him and he signed with Baltimore. I had a little bit of questions because I don't super trust their secondary, but I mean, their pass rush and their linebacking core is honestly pretty solid. We'll have to see what Green Bay looks like long term. I know the other thing that was a real question for Green Bay last year was Jordan Love did come in. He's a little hurt, had a little bit of issues, wasn't really able to get right kind of as the season progressed because he got hurt initially in Brazil against Philly. We'll have to see if he's able to stay healthy as the season progresses. Nonetheless, solid NFC North matchup. The second, one of the last 3 games I want to talk about, though, on the NFL side, one that I feel really does need to be studied. And Mike actually brought this up in our group chat the other day. Kind of the fall of CJ Stroud and the Texans really needs to be studied more than anything. Because CJ Stroud does not look like the CJ Stroud that we've been used to seeing for the last couple of years. It doesn't look like it did his rookie year in the league, where he absolutely balled out. Great yardage, great touchdown to interception ratio. He just doesn't look the same. He's 19 to 27. He's 188 passing yards and a pick. He was sacked 3 times. They couldn't really do much with the running game, even with Nick Chubb there. He only got about 60 yards. CJ Stroud had the next with 32. And even passing yards wise, I mean, Jaden Higgins, Xavier Hutchinson, Dalton Schultz, all, decent, but nothing crazy. Whereas on the Rams side, Matt Stafford looked absolutely solid. 21 to 29, a touchdown, 245 yards. He was sacked 3 times. But Puka Nacua, 10 receptions for 130 yards throughout his day. It's weird to see this regression from the Texans, though, after a team that started so hot, Stroud's rookie year, and then to really lose a lot of that sizzle after they even make it into the playoffs. They didn't win a playoff game, but they at least made it into the playoffs. You thought, okay, the future has to be bright there in Houston, and it just seems they kind of get worse and worse and worse as each game goes on. Even as he gets more experience and more practice in, it's just weird to see them regressing, even with a fairly good amount of a talent. Now they do need to fix up their offensive line a little bit. Uh, Now, obviously, their defense only held the Rams to 14 points, even while allowing Puka Nacua to have 130 receiving yards, which is still pretty good. It's just a little weird that the Texans have kind of fallen back a little when they were honestly in this game for a pretty good amount of time. The game that probably shocked everybody, though, the Ravens at the Bills. The Ravens were up by big numbers going into the fourth. They were up, 34-19 going into the fourth quarter. The Bills roar back. They score 22 points to the Ravens 6. Josh Allen, 33 of 46, 394 yards, 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry for the Ravens had a big game with 169 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and Zay Flowers the same, 143 yards and a receiving touchdown. It's really more surprising just because of how usually dominant Baltimore's defense is. I don't really take anything away from the Bills offensively or even Lamar offensively. They both have great offenses with their quarterbacks just because they have the perfect mixture of quarterbacks being able to throw, being able to run, and do pretty much everything. But the fact that this Baltimore defense gave up that many points is what's really surprising, with a secondary that's absolutely solid, a pass rush that's absolutely solid, a linebacking core that's solid. They almost always draft well. They're always able to figure out how to pay guys and get them a good amount of money. And offensively, they have compliments for Lamar Jackson now. It's something that they've been trying to work on for the last few years. It's just surprising the Bills were able to, come away with a little bit of a stunner. It will be interesting to see, are these two teams really going to separate themselves finally from Kansas City? I know Kansas City had a little bit of the hiccup last Friday night, September 5th against the Chiefs. They ended up beating them 27-21. Herbert looked absolutely fantastic. Mahomes was the leading rusher for the Chiefs. But it'll be interesting to see, can they separate themselves, because neither have really been able to beat Patrick Mahomes in the regular season. Neither have definitely beaten him in the postseason when it matters most. So it'll be interesting to see, will these two teams face again in a rematch? And if they don't, can either one potentially take Kansas City and the Chiefs down if they make the playoffs, which more than likely they will. And even though Mike's unable to be here, unfortunately, because he's having to deal with Chicago rush hour traffic at the moment, Monday night, the Bears fall to the Vikings after getting out to a pretty hot start. It was 17-6 at one point, and then the Vikings are able to end up coming back with 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to the Bears 1. Caleb Williams didn't look bad. He looked fairly solid. He was 21-35, 210 yards at a touchdown. I know Mike actually watched this game a little bit more than I did. I watched about part of it because I had to get up early yesterday, about 4:30 in the morning, and drive back home from a coworker's wedding. From what I heard, he kind of missed some good early throws. He was overthrowing DJ Moore a little bit. Seemed like the connection and timing was off. That could just be a first game of the season type of thing. So I don't take too much away from it. I know for Mike and for most Bears fans, it's one of those, like, it's disappointing because, again, anybody who's watched the show, I'm not a fan of JJ McCarthy. I was not a huge fan of him in Michigan. I'm not a huge fan of him in the NFL. He won his first game. He did pretty much everything that you can do to win your first game in the NFL, which, again, a little bit of a surprise, but I was just kind of surprised more that the Bears fell than anything. So we'll see as the season goes on. It's a tough first loss. It's a divisional opponent. It was at home in Chicago. But obviously there's still chances to clean it up. The season's not over by any means. There's still a ton of football left. But it is just interesting to see, how that ended up coming about. But a little bit of NFL predictions before we go into kind of the halfway part of the show, and then we go into college football. We have week 2 starting tomorrow on September 11th. We have the Commanders going to the Packers, where Packers are favored by 3.5. I think I'm going to take the Packers just because of the momentum. I like Washington. I think Washington has plenty of firepower. But unfortunately, Green Bay is one of those teams as they get hot, it's at home. That Green Bay crowd is always a ruckus and a menace. I'm going to have to go with the home team unless Washington's just able to surprise me, and I kind of hope that they do. But then after that on Sunday, you got the Jags going to the Bengals. I'm going to take the Bengals in this. I think firepower and offensively, they're going to be too much for the Jags to handle. The Jags they're still struggling, even with Travis Hunter, even with Brian Thomas Jr., even with Trevor Lawrence, even with ETN. They still seem to struggle, and I don't know if defensively they're going to be able to really handle the offensive power of the Bengals. Now they might look a little better offensively just because I don't know how the Bengals defense is going to end up being. They got Trey Hendrickson back. They got Shamar Stewart finally signed and ready to go, and they have a new defensive coordinator. But we'll have to see what does that really look like, and can they potentially, can they at least complement the Bengals offense? We'll see. And typically Joe Burrow and the Bengals don't do well the first couple of games of the season, but they did win last week, so who knows if this is going to be a new era in Cincinnati or not? We'll find out. The Giants go to the Cowboys. Dallas is actually favored by 5.5. I'm going to take Dallas in this, even with Russ and with Malik Neighbors. The Giants got absolutely destroyed by Washington. They didn't look the same. Russ is still trying to be the old Russ of 2013 when he was a little younger. He could move more, and it just doesn't seem to work anymore. I think Russ needs to get in the reality check of you're going to have to be just purely a pocket passing quarterback, and it's going to be hard because he's one of the shorter quarterbacks in the league. It's not going to be easy for him to do. And I don't know if the Giants really have the offensive line or the supporting cast for him to truly be able to succeed to do that. But I'm going to probably take Dallas in this, to be 100% honest with you. Then we have the Bears going to the Lions. Lions are also favored by 5.5. I'm going to take the Bears in this, mainly because if anybody knows the Lions better than Ben Johnson, it's probably just Dan Campbell. I think even with Aaron Glenn gone, Ben Johnson knows that team. They, promoted from within with as far as the defensive and offensive coordinators go. So he's going to know their system. He's going to know a lot of their schemes and whatnot. I would probably take the Bears in an upset in this, to be 100% honest with you, just because they're going to know what to expect on the Lions side. And I think the Lions will probably know what to expect from Dennis Allen, and they might even know what to expect from Ben Johnson. But I think the Bears could potentially come away with an upset win here. Then you got the Rams going to the Titans. They're favored by 5.5 as well. I'm going to take the Rams. The Titans are just such a mess. Obviously Cam Ward is a bright spot, but watching his throws to receivers against Denver, it was rough. And I think it's going to continue to be rough for him for a while. The Rams are clicking. They've got a lot of talent. They could potentially be a dark horse. They could probably even come out of the NFC West and win the division. So I'm definitely going to take the Rams. You got the Patriots at the Dolphins. Dolphins are favored by 1.5. I'm going to pick the Dolphins in this just because it's at home. I think with it being at home, Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they're all going to make some adjustments as, from that week 1 loss where they got absolutely destroyed. But this is a, Mike Vrabel, Patriots coach-led team with Drake May. So I could see this definitely being close. I'm just going to give it to the Dolphins purely because of home field advantage. And historically, the Patriots never did well, even with Brady, as they even went down to Miami. Then you got the 49ers at the Saints. For whatever reason, 49ers only favored by 2.5. I'm going to take the 49ers. The Saints are still an absolute mess. Even with the 49ers being injured and having all sorts of injuries, I'm going to take them just purely on talent and coaching alone. Bills go to the Jets. Bills are favored by 6.5. I'm going to take the Bills. I think the Jets look solid. I do still think that they need some work, but I think the Bills getting a big comeback victory win over the Ravens like that are going to come in hot. And I don't expect a whole lot of the upset value as far as, the Jets, like the Bills overlooking the Jets type of thing. I just don't see that happen. Charles says I should play fantasy football. I don't do great in fantasy football for whatever reason. I'm better at picking the teams than I am like, oh yeah, I think this individual player is going to have a breakout game. No, I'm awful at that. Like this last one, I had Justin Fields on my bench for Bo Nix because I'm like, oh, he's not going to do that great. And yeah, Justin Fields got a ton more points than Bo Nix did, and it was super frustrating. Then we got the Seahawks at the Steelers. The Steelers are favored by 2.5. I'm going to take that. They kept a close game against San Francisco. I'm going to take Steelers. It's at home. I don't trust Sam Darnold a whole lot, especially if they get down. I don't trust that to be able to happen, even though Jackson Smith and Jigba had a great game. It seems like Aaron Rodgers is clicking. He clicked with DK Metcalf. They were able to make some pretty big plays, and it'll be a little bit of a revenge game for DK going against the team that traded him away. So I do expect DK to probably have a big game, though. So I'm going to go with Steelers. The Browns go to the Ravens. Ravens are favored by almost 12. I'm going to take the Ravens. I got very little faith in the Browns whatsoever. The Broncos come here to Indy to take on the Colts. Denver is favored by 1.5. They struggled a little bit against Tennessee, and I was really surprised by that, considering the fact that Cam Ward's a rookie. There's not a whole lot of bright spots there offensively other than Calvin Ridley. I know they have Tony Pollard and Cam Ward. Again, having been a Cowboys fan, having watched Tony Pollard, he is solid. He's a speedster, but he's not the guy that you can rely on to really carry your team if your rookie quarterback needs it. So I'm going to go with Indy because that defense was on fire, and I mean Daniel Jones looked good when he was playing. So I'll give it to Indy as the home team. Panthers go to the Cardinals. I'm going to take the Cardinals in this. I didn't really see a whole lot of bright spots out of Carolina as they faced Jacksonville, even though they even had about a little over an hour delay in the game. So you had basically an extra hour to kind of rest, prepare, make adjustments, and it didn't seem like any of that happened. So I'm going to go with Arizona in this one. Then you have a rematch of the Super Bowl. You have the Eagles versus Chiefs. Philly is favored by 1.5. They did add pass rusher Zadarius Smith this past week to try to help boost the pass rush. Jalen Carter should be back, barring him potentially spitting on anybody before the game starts. I'm going to take the Chiefs in this, and I know a lot of people may consider that kind of weird. The Eagles' secondary looked awful against Dallas, and so did that pass rush. Like, Dallas has a pretty rebuilt offensive line. Dallas ultimately ended up losing the game, but Dallas pretty much ran whatever they wanted to on them. They scored on just about every single drive. I mean, there was not a whole lot of punting in that game against Dallas with Philly, and vice versa. So I'm going to take the Chiefs in this. I think Patrick Mahomes will take advantage of a weak secondary like that. And I think defensively, the Chiefs will be able to respond pretty well as far as containing against Jalen Hurts. This will be the third big matchup between them in the last few years. Obviously, they had the Super Bowl not too long ago, this past February, and even just a couple of years before that, they had a Super Bowl matchup, and the Chiefs ended up winning it. So I'm going to take the Chiefs in this. I don't see them starting out 0-2 by any means. And then to end the night, Sunday night, you've got Falcons at the Vikings. Minnesota's favored by 3.5. I'm going to take the Falcons. I think the Falcons will be able to get everything right to make the adjustments. They obviously they have the talent there. I think Minnesota also has the talent. Again, I'm not sold on essentially what is the rookie season for JJ McCarthy, even though it's his first full year starting. It's technically his second year in the league, but he never started last year, so it's all but his rookie year. I think Falcons will take advantage of that. I think it'll be a close game, but I think the Falcons will win that. Then you got the Buccaneers heading down to Houston. Houston is favored by 2.5. I'm going to take the Bucs. They were able to actually make a comeback victory and claw the win out of the Falcons' hands. Emeka Ibuka absolutely burst onto the scene with 2 touchdowns in his debut game as a rookie. So I mean, I can't really go against the Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield and whatnot. They look great. I think they'll continue to roll. And then probably the best game of Monday night, you got the Chargers at the Raiders. Chargers are favored by 3.5. I'm going to take the Chargers. I think with that win against the Chiefs, I think they're going to absolutely be rolling. I don't know if the Raiders have that much momentum after having technically upset the Patriots, but we'll have to wait and see. But I would definitely take the Chargers in this nonetheless, though. But I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, we will talk more about college football, some of the game results of that, and then some of the predictions of this coming weekend. So when I come back.
Signed up to fight for freedom. What a price you had to pay. Picture in a helmet, missing family every day. Your Lady Liberty, dressed like G.I. Jane. Some scars we'll never see. She will never be the same. She's a mother, she's a daughter. She's a sister and a friend. Standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. On that old dusty base with the meadows that shine, she's been to hell and back for the stars and the stripes. Your Lady Liberty, dressed like G.I. Jane, and some scars we'll never see, and she will never be the same. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister and a friend, standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. Yeah, yes. For the ones that didn't make it, we will pause and then we cry. We can still see their smile in every sunrise. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister and a friend, standing tall in that uniform until the very end. When Uncle Sam called, she signed that line to serve. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her. 'Cause you can't spell hero without her.
All right, welcome back in, everyone, to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. We are back to talk some college football. What a crazy weekend. We had upsets once again. We had even had teams fall completely out of the rankings. Florida's no longer ranked. Arizona State's no longer ranked. Both of them ranked within the top 15, but because they lost to unranked opponents, it just completely dropped them out, which is a huge surprise. And I think still a little bit of bias that they did that to Florida. They did it to Arizona State, yet they didn't do it to Alabama. And I know if anybody's an Alabama fan watching, probably going to get a ton of hate for that because it's the Tide. Y'all lost bad to Florida State. Now, y'all did beat up on ULM. Congratulations. You beat up on University of Louisiana Monroe. I don't know why you're flexing on that, to be 100% honest with you, but just saying, it's a little weird bias. I will talk about some of the bigger games, though, at least some of the Power 4 versus Power 4 opponents. Like I said, I went 9-2, my two upsets being Arizona State being upset by Mississippi State, and then Baylor actually beating SMU for the 12th straight time. I believe it's the 12th straight time. They haven't beat them in years, by the way, which I was like, that's insane. Let's see. Let's go kind of the first Power 4 versus Power 4. Oregon absolutely dominated Oklahoma State. They didn't stop scoring until the third quarter, and they scored over 20 points in every single quarter up until that point. And I think they just did that because they got tired of doing it. So huge win for Oregon. A little bit sad for Oklahoma State, considering they were always one of those very under the radar Big 12 programs that was always competitive in the Big 12. But they always just kind of had a couple games that tripped them up that would cause them not to win the Big 12 championship. But I mean, Oregon absolutely looks solid. They continue to roll, and good for them on a win. I did end up getting that one right, but I wasn't super surprised, to be honest with you. Illinois ends up beating Duke 45-19. Wasn't super surprised by that, to be honest with you. Illinois has all the experience. They brought a lot of their guys back. Duke, again, I know they had a couple of years there where it's like they got some big upsets. But Duke, they're not a huge powerhouse program. I didn't expect anything too crazy to come out of that. The big one, though, Mississippi State upsets Arizona State 24-20. This was really a surprise because it was 17-3. For a good long time. They ended up bringing it back 17-10. They end up getting super, super close. They end up even tying it. They end up almost actually tying it. And you think it's kind of won. Mississippi State throws an absolute dot and ends up closing the game out on a touchdown. It was just really surprising that Arizona State did this. And I know Joel Klatt mentioned this, and I even mentioned it on my show a couple weeks ago. He wasn't sold on Arizona State for actually a pretty good reason. The biggest being they lost Cam Scatterbo to the draft. He's gone, and he was a big heart beating piece of that team. And I know a lot of people, and they even interviewed Levitt, the quarterback for Arizona State, of hey, how did you feel not having Cam Scatterbo in the back, in the backfield now? He said it's a lot, it's a lot more quiet. There's a lot less arguments, a lot less changes with everything. But again, that's credit to Cam's IQ. Cam's IQ of knowing what to look for, what to make adjustments of. The fact that he's gonna run hard, he's gonna play hard. It was really surprising that Arizona State fell this way to Mississippi State. First time Mississippi State has won against a ranked out of conference opponent at home since 1991. It's been 34 years since they've been able to do that, which is absolutely crazy. Probably one of the other big surprises of the weekend, South Florida goes to the Swamp and absolutely upsets Florida 18-16. This was probably the biggest surprise of the night. Florida went into the halftime with a 9-6 lead. South Florida comes out, they score 9 points. And the very last drive, I mean, it's 16-15. There's about 3 minutes left. They're able to absolutely just drive down the field. And instead of Florida using those timeouts, Billy Napier lets it get down to about 30 seconds. USF gets the first down, and they're already in field goal range at that point. And then basically just lets them kick a field goal as time expires to ultimately win the game, which I was really, really surprised about that they let this happen type of thing. I don't know if they overestimated themselves, if they underestimated USF. Our buddy Randy in the chat was very high on USF's coach, and obviously they look very well coached. They beat Boise State pretty well. Now they've upset Florida. They even knocked Florida out of the ranks. Now USF is actually ranked 18th themselves. I'm just overall surprised. I did not expect it to happen. I know a lot of Gator fans didn't expect it to happen. A lot of Gator fans are upset with Billy Napier, and they're ready for him to be fired again. I did have a Florida fan that I worked with bring up kind of a good point. He said DJ Lagway kind of reminds him of Anthony Richardson. When everything's working and when he's able to hit his first read, he's fine. But when he has to scramble, he has to run. And if he can't stay healthy, which he has had a history of not being able to do, kind of like Anthony Richardson, he struggles, and that seemed to be what South Florida was able to do to really upset Florida. So we'll have to see what that looks like this coming weekend against LSU. That'll be the real big test. Michigan falls to Oklahoma. This is actually a pretty close game the entire time. It was 14-0 going into half. Michigan's able to roar back with 13 points. John Mateer looks just as good as advertised as far as being a wonderful running quarterback. Running quarterback goes. A Michigan fan I work with, I was kind of asking him about it. He said that Michigan's offensive line didn't look good, and it really didn't. I know Haynes, the running back, got 125 yards, but 75 of that was just on one play. So realistically, they were only able to run for 50 yards. So they shut Michigan down pretty well. Michigan's struggles may continue as they now officially lose Sharon Moore to a 2-game suspension, just as they're about to enter into Big Ten conference play. We'll have to see what does that do for Michigan, and can Michigan stay afloat until he comes back? It'll also be interesting to see what they do with Bryce Underwood. As he came out and said, I don't want to be a running quarterback. I want to be more of a traditional pocket passing quarterback. I think he needs to realize that in today's league, you're going to have to do a little bit of both. If you're big enough as an athlete to be able to be a great pocket passer and a good runner, you need to learn how to utilize both. You don't have to do just one or the other. You do have to learn how to maximize the potential of both, because we see it in the NFL right now. Jalen Hurts, great pocket passer, great rusher. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, even Dak Prescott in his younger days. All of them very good at being pocket passers, but also being able to run the ball. He's going to have to learn to be able to do that too. If he does, he's definitely going to be able to reach his potential for sure. Baylor upsets SMU. Again, another really surprise one, because it was 24-21. Baylor roared back in the second quarter. And you kind of thought, okay, this game might be over. They tied it at 24. Both end up scoring 14 points. They take it to overtime. They end up stopping SMU. They kick the field goal. Baylor ultimately ends up winning, getting an upset win over the Ponies, or over the Mustangs or Ponies, whichever one you want to consider them. And SMU also falls out of the rankings. A little bit surprised by that. I thought SMU was going to take it. It might just be one of those SMU kind of snuck in last year under the hidden guise of, hey, it's first year in the ACC. Nobody's really going to expect us. And I think they were just fully able to take advantage of that. And they absolutely rolled with it. And then finally, at least last big Power 4 game, Ole Miss versus Kentucky, able to finally get revenge from last year when Kentucky upset Ole Miss. And Ole Miss, I'm not going to say they dominated, but they did do pretty well. Their running back Lacey had 138 yards. Wallace had 117 receptions. Austin Simmons, 235 passing yards, 2 picks. I am a little worried. Simmons has thrown a lot of picks. He's thrown 4 interceptions so far this year in just a couple of games. One of those games being to an FCS school. So I'm a little worried about what does his production look like, as the year continues on, and as the year continues, are the interceptions going to continue to be a problem? He's a very smart kid. He already has his bachelor's. He's only like 19 years old. Very smart, very intelligent kid. Sat behind Jackson Dart for a couple of years. Actually went into Ole Miss early. That's why he has his bachelor's already. I believe he's working on his master's. He's a sophomore. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, 576 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 picks so far in the 2 games. One of those being against Georgia State, and then Kentucky. Georgia State, he had 3 touchdowns and 2 picks, and then against Kentucky, he had 2 picks. So it'll be interesting to see, does that get cleaned up as the season goes on with Lane Kiffin? Because if not, the Rebels are the Rebels are going to be in trouble, and it's going to be really, really bad. But let's get into the predictions, though. I actually already made the graphic for this, so if you want to check out the graphic for the games that I have, make your own picks, make your own comments and whatnot, please let me know what you think, who you would ultimately end up having winning. So we'll kind of go in order here of what I got as far as this coming week goes and whatnot. So we have North Carolina State at Wake Forest. I'm taking North Carolina State. I don't know enough about Wake Forest. North Carolina State, always kind of there. Again, they're another one of those. They always lose a couple of games to keep them out of the ACC championship, but they're almost always consistently towards kind of the top of that conference. So I'm gonna take North Carolina State. You got Kansas State going to Arizona. Kansas State has lost 2 games so far this year. They got upset by Army. Obviously, they lost the first game of the year to Iowa State over in Ireland. Arizona has looked good their last couple of games. They're going to have momentum. It's going to be in Arizona. I don't know what's going on with the Wildcats at Kansas State, but they're not going to be able to beat the Arizona Wildcats. So I'm gonna take Arizona in this. And as Booger McFarland say, at the end of the day, the Wildcats are going to win this one. Take that for what you will. Then you got Oregon going to Northwestern. I'm going to take Oregon. Not really a whole lot more needs to be said there. Northwestern, it's not a great power football school. They did get a win. I don't expect much from Northwestern. Oregon's going to continue to roll by far. Then you've got Clemson at Georgia Tech. This one I felt was the most interesting because Clemson struggled against Troy. They struggled hard against Troy. They ultimately ended up finally coming away with the victory, but it does make you wonder, when is Clemson's offense really going to click? Now they have the talent, they have everything in their favor to be able to beat Georgia Tech. Just the fact that it's at Georgia Tech instead of at Clemson. But we'll have to see. But I'm still going to take Clemson nonetheless. USC goes to Purdue to take on the Boilermakers. I'm going to take USC. They do technically lead the nation in scoring currently as it stands. I don't trust Purdue, even with all the losses that Lincoln Riley and USC has had. They're still an extremely talented team. I'm going to take USC in a pretty solid victory. Again, the game that's probably one of the hardest to decide. Florida travels to the real Death Valley in Baton Rouge to take on my LSU Tigers. I'm going to take LSU in this. Don't get me wrong. I love the Tigers. I love LSU. They're really bad about they will let teams stay in a game longer than they should. They'll keep it close, and they're going to give me anxiety and a potential heart attack all night long. But I'm still going to roll with my Tigers nonetheless. It'll be interesting to see, though. Does this mean that LSU is still legit? Does it mean that Florida is more fraudulent than we thought? Maybe Florida's not going to do as well this year as even I potentially thought that they would. Or if LSU slips up, are they not as good as maybe potentially thought? And maybe it's not their year, but we'll see. I'm still going to ride with LSU though. Then you got Vandy going to South Carolina. I'm going to take the Gamecocks in this. I think this will be a closer and better game than people expect. At the end of the day, it is still Vanderbilt. I don't have a whole lot of trust. I like Diego Pavia. I think he's got that team roaring and built for success. I don't know what that success necessarily means for Vandy. I definitely don't think it means the SEC championship. But I think with how the Gamecocks play, they're probably going to be a little bit on the roll. It's going to be at home, which is also going to be a benefit for them. I'm going to take the Gamecocks in this. Then we've got Colorado going to Houston. I'm going to take Colorado. They looked good against Delaware in its first ever matchup against them. Houston, again, I don't really trust Houston that well. I'm going to take Colorado in this. And then we've got Wisconsin going to Alabama. I'm going to take Alabama. Again, it's at home. Wisconsin and Luke Fickell. I think this is Luke Fickell's last year in Wisconsin. He's tried to implement a new system. He's tried to move away from what Paul Chryst used to do as far as strong run game, good defense. He's trying to move it more into a passing offense type of style. But I don't feel that Wisconsin truly has an identity. And if they do, I don't know what that identity is. And it truly makes me wonder. And I wonder if Badgers fans kind of feel the same way. So I'm going to take Alabama in this one. The other game, probably the biggest game of the weekend, you have Georgia versus Tennessee. I feel this is an absolute coin flip. I feel really either team could win. Joey Aguilar and the Tennessee Volunteers are absolutely rolling. He has believing in Tennessee again. And Georgia, there's a little bit of an ask why they struggled against an Austin Peay school and only won like 28-3. So there's a little bit of a question mark with that. And Tennessee hasn't beaten Georgia in a good long while. I'm going to take Georgia in this. And I even asked Mike and Randy, who are both huge Volunteers fans. Mike would say, go Big Orange right now if he was on the show. I asked both of them. Randy kind of feels the same way. He said it's always going to be go Vols, but until they show me they can do it, I don't think that they're going to win. So I'm also going to ride with Georgia on this one. Oregon State travels to Texas Tech. I'm going to take Texas Tech. Oregon State is honestly kind of a disappointment. I thought they were going to do better than what they have, and they've unfortunately just been a pretty big disappointment for me so far. Then Then we've got Pitt going to West Virginia, the backyard brawl, an old school college football rivalry. It's in West Virginia this year. I'm going to take Pitt. West Virginia got upset by Ohio last week, another big rivalry game for them. Ended up losing 17-10. Not really a good look when you're a big Power 4 school that, again, there's not a whole lot of expectations. The potential's really not like always there, but the fact that you lose to them, that's kind of a little bit of a knock on you. So I'm probably going to roll with Pitt on that one. The other game that I felt was probably going to be the hardest to pick who I would have win. You have Texas A&M going to Notre Dame this time to face off. Notre Dame obviously got the big upset win last year in College Station against Texas A&M. I'm picking Notre Dame because it's at home. They did not play this week. They were on a bye. They have a chance to make adjustments post the Miami game, which they did. They kept it close against Miami, which I was really surprised about. So we'll have to see, do those adjustments continue to stay? Does Notre Dame continue to have the talent? Again, it's at home. They should have a little bit of momentum with that. And Texas A&M, again, they're a school. They always spend a ton of money. They always recruit very well, and then they're just never able to really put it together. Texas A&M is one of those schools that you gotta show me for me to believe it, because right now I'm not seeing it, and I haven't seen it for a long time. You're always ranked really high. You're always told how well you recruit, and then it usually ends up in a 7-5, 8-4 season at the end of the year. So I'm going to go with the Fighting Irish on this one. Then you got Minnesota traveling to Cal. I didn't think Cal was going to be that good. Their quarterback looks absolutely solid, but PJ Fleck and the Minnesota Gophers also very solid. Been solid for a long time. He's got that team absolutely believing. And last time I said, I don't believe Cal will be able to do it. They're a mess. They end up beating Oregon State pretty well, but I'm going to go with Minnesota in the Big Ten on this one. Then finally, the last big Power 4 matchup, you got Boston College at Stanford. Stanford got upset by Hawaii of all teams. And then to boot, Boston College actually put on a great game against Michigan State. Took them all the way down to overtime. Michigan State just ultimately ends up coming away with the win. No knock against Boston College. I think they're a very good team. Again, I don't know if they're going to be good enough to be able to make a run for, say, the ACC title or whatnot, but I think they'll be good enough to be able to pull away a win here and get their second win of the college football season. But nonetheless, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your weekend. Hope everybody's able to hopefully enjoy this weekend of sports and whatnot. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate all my fellow MBR podcasters that tune in as well. Again, check out all of them. They have such great stuff, such great content. If you are looking for anything as far as advice, looking to talk, if you want to hear other veterans that are highlighted as far as, small business owners, people that they truly do go through the struggles and they figured out a way to balance those struggles, go through life, have businesses, families, all of that. All of these great shows on MBR are able to have that, and they highlight it, and they do an absolute wonderful job. If you want to learn more about that, if you're at least looking on video, there's a little QR code right here just above my head that you can scan to learn more about that. If you're listening and you want to learn more, just look up mbradio.us or MBR Radio on Facebook. Any of those, they'll definitely be able to take you to links and get you more information on it. But nonetheless, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Hope everybody has a wonderful night and a great weekend. And we will be back next week to talk some more NFL and some more college football. Everybody have a great night.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us, giving our veterans a voice.